Hey everybody, it is Razib Khan, and I am here with the conversation with Josiah Neely of the R Street Institute. And this is number 50. So that's, I don't know. It's kind of a big deal number
Okay.
wise. Half of 150. It feels, we've been doing this about a year. So that makes sense. I think we skipped like 1 or 2 weeks. Might have done a
Yes.
makeup. I don't remember, but, it might. So, we've been doing this, like, week in, week out, like, talking a lot of different things. So this week, we are gonna start out with something a little different. We're gonna talk about, the I don't know, it's not a phony war, but, like, the short war between,
The war
conflict.
you've never heard of.
Yeah, in Cambodia and Thailand. It was in the northwest corner, and it was over a temple complex that Thailand, kind of, claims, but really,
Right.
it's pretty much in Cambodia, and they've just been beefing about it for decades, apparently. And the Cambodian strongman, I think that would be the term to use, Hun Sen, who's been in power since, well, I mean, I think he was in power since the early 1990s, and really he pushed everybody else out by around the year 2000 in terms of their, multi-party democracy. So he has basically a one-party state. The prime minister, I think, is his son now. So Hun Sen basically seems to have started this. The Thai military responded, and my first thought was, I haven't been keeping close track of it, but it's like this insane because Thailand's economy is about 10 times bigger than Cambodia. It's a much more populous state, much wealthier, much bigger military, I think, and so it's insane. On
Right.
the other hand, it's when you look at how wars start overall, a shockingly large number of them are pretty insane in terms of like just rational calculus. I mean, so
Right.
like think about something that we don't care or think about. The Eritrea Ethiopia war, which
Hmm.
resulted in nothing except for
Right.
like a massive number of deaths and economic destruction.
Yes. Yeah.
So at the end of it, they had less as each country, but they were like, we showed them after this, like, stalemate. And I feel like the Cambodia Thailand thing is like, you guys are both in ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Cambodia has like a growing economy, trying to like kind of rebuild from communism. Thailand is not. Some people don't understand about Thailand. It's a middle income country. It is not a poor country. Like if you go to Bangkok, there's large areas of Bangkok that are pretty nice. It's like Thailand and Malaysia are kind of two of the really mature Asian tigers, in Southeast Asia in terms of doing export manufacturing and other things. Thailand obviously has a big tourism industry, whereas Cambodia is an up and coming developing nation. Like it is a poor nation, and so it doesn't make any sense, but it happened. And like, I think people in the United States are like, what the hell? Just
Well, yeah. Most people in the United States probably didn't even know it was happening. I will say it seems that both. Well, first, the instigation. It doesn't seem like this was some sort of planned out thing. There have been these occasional skirmishes and things got kind of out of hand. Someone uh got killed or lost an arm or something, I don't know, and so it kind of spiraled. Even at the height of it, it doesn't seem like it was that. Um, I mean, every life is a tragedy, but I was reading an article that said 33 people had died in the war, and of course, that's maybe a tenth of the people of who died here in Texas in the flooding. Right? It's a different situation, but so it's uh smaller scale. I'm a little I can't quite wrap my head around there being border disputes in the days of, MapQuest or whatever, but I guess they still do exist in certain places. There's some like temples there or something that I think would be the reason why they would both want to claim that particular bit of ground. Uh, the interesting thing to me about the whole thing, aside from just the trivia, the obscure nature of it, is apparently, they were going at it, and I think you have to say that Thailand was having the better of the situation, but they did both agree to a ceasefire because President Trump said that if they didn't have a ceasefire, he was going to stop tariff negotiations with both countries, so he had imposed tariffs on basically everybody, and then they were suspended. And I mean, that worked. Even some places that aren't notably known for praising President Trump. I was reading a news article in the BBC that basically said, yeah, he should get the credit for bringing about the ceasefire or whatever. So this is interesting because I mean, it's not like on the one hand, uh, I don't know that the U.S. has a huge national interest in this particular conflict, other than just being in general war is bad for business or whatever. But it is interesting that they were able to kind of stop it uh, by threatening to impose tariffs on both sides, right? So that it's not a huge thing, but I thought that was an interesting aspect of America. We still have power, right? We still have some. I guess you would call that soft power, right? Or
But so I think one of the reasons that that would have worked though is because it's a third party, and so in terms of like the ego, because a lot of it's just ego.
yes,
So you don't want to be seen as the one who blinks first. But if a third party is imposing it on you, you can both say like, well, we didn't have any choice.
right. Yeah, that's
You know,
right. Yeah, and I'm sure even though if you're Cambodia, you want the whole thing to stop because you're kind of getting getting your ass handed to you. And if you're Thailand, I mean, you don't want to stop for rap reasons or for face save reasons or whatever. But really, do you really want to do it? Yeah, I think it's probably the case that neither of them were hugely invested in the conflict.
so I just looked it up by the way. Thailand has a military active duty armed force of 360,000. Cambodia has 75,000. So anyway, you look at what I would say is Cambodia was going to lose, but
Cambodia doesn't
Cambodia
have
has a lot less to lose. What?
I don't. They don't have an air force. I think right.
Cambodia, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the famous like thing, or not? It's the thing people say. I mean, Cambodia is a. I mean, okay, there's a lot of, well, just for context, I mean, I think most of our listeners and viewers are well aware of the Khmer Rouge in the 1970s.
Right.
25% of Cambodians died in the
Like the
4-year
one thing they
period.
know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they and there was definitely skewed towards what Anatoly Karlin calls elite human capital. Like so.
Right.
There's some story. It might be apocryphal, but it reflects the reality. It's like they would have people march, and they would say "stop" in French, and the people that would understand and stop would be shot because they understood French.
Um,
You know,
right.
or people with glasses were targeted because like, oh, like they must be educated.
Or the
So Cambodia,
Chinese, I think. Uh,
yeah, I think Cambodia they would try to go back to year zero, and like the social engineering on steroids. It was crazy. So the country was really messed up, and it's like slowly. I mean, this is a country. I think its GDP is still per capita still lower than Bangladesh, for example. Just to give people how poor it is. I
right.
mean, its economic growth rates are high, but it's like starting from a really low baseline. It's
Yeah.
pretty underpopulated. Part of it is the Khmer Rouge, but part of it is also just like it's been a little bit of a backwater over the last centuries. One reason Cambodia is an independent country is actually because of the French. If the French had not come in, Vietnam and what is now Thailand would almost certainly have partitioned Cambodia. So southern Vietnam, the area around Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, was part of Cambodia, and a lot of or the Khmer Kingdom, and a lot of modern day Thailand was also part of the Khmer Kingdom. And actually, the Thai ethnicity, it's a little bit the analogy that I think would work is a little bit like the Anglo-Saxons in Britain. The Thai came in from southern China, like let's say like somewhat below before like 1000 AD. There's like something called the Thai migrations, and they, in Burma, they didn't overthrow the native people. They're a minority, the Thai. They call themselves the Shan there, so different name.
Yeah.
In India, there's actually some Thai-speaking people that got assimilated in Assam. So the kingdoms in Assam in the northeast were actually the original Assamese language. The indigenous Assamese language is actually related to Thai, and that got absorbed into like an Indo-Aryan language. Anyway, the point is these people were like leaving southern China highlands 1,000 years ago, and in Thailand, the native Mon population, I guess, Mon, Khmer, whatever. There was like a native population that spoke a Khmer related language. Their kingdoms got overthrown and they got conquered by the Thais. It became Thailand. But in
Yeah.
Cambodia, those people still continued, and so Cambodia is kind of like a legacy of an older civilization that was, at, at one time more centered actually in Thailand. And so there's this weird like cultural beef where the Cambodians are like, you know, like you know, we with ties and stuff. I don't know. I mean, like or like the ties are just like fake newcomers. Now the reality is like if you look at the genetics, like they're still mostly the same people now. It's just the Thai people have like on top of it, a layer of like Thai invaders, but also I think Thaksin Shinawatra, who is kind of behind the current Thai government. He was a prime minister like 20 years ago, and now his daughter's I think prime minister, and Hun Sen. They're both also part ethnic Chinese, and so like they have like that in common. So there's like a Chinese layer. There's a cultural difference where it's like two different languages, but they also are both Theravada Buddhist, both pretty much the exact same religion. They even did the same sort of like Indian influenced dance styles are common in Cambodia and Thailand. So like when you talk about like Indochina, it's like kind of a weird thing where the French ruled over Vietnam, which is more like China, and
Right.
Cambodia and Laos, and especially Cambodia, which is more like India and more like Thailand. And so these are culturally very similar nations in some ways. And so this is not one of those things like, oh, it's like a clash of civilizations or something. It'd be like Vietnam and China getting into a fight where it's like actually like Vietnam is like really influenced by China. So it just shows you how insane wars can be, how they can blow up due to egos. And from what I was, from my reading, from my take, a lot of it just has to do with the fact that Hun Sen has been in power, the strongman in Cambodia. He's been in power for, I mean, I guess like over 30 years now. And he like leaked some conversation where I think Chinawat was the prime minister. She was I think she was crapping on like the military and they got super pissed and
Mm.
so he interfered in the Thai democratic system and then started beefing and didn't realize, oh, just because like in a semi-democratic, which is what Thailand is arguably because the military does coups, just because there's a lot of like conflict doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to get pissed if you try
Right.
to aggravate them. And I assume that he has people around them that tell him he's a genius and he should beef with a nation that's like whose economy and therefore like military industrial, power arguably is 10 times larger. That he should beef with them. I think this is like a problem of these dictatorial regimes where the guys, you know, from everything that I've heard and over the years, and like, I've kept track of what's going on in Thailand on and off. I used to read the Far Eastern Economic Review back in the day. And, Hun Sen is not like Lee Kuan Yew. He's not like a strong, he's not like a father of the nation that's super bright. He's a little bit of a thug, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And like the thing is like Hun Sen's number one qualification is he was not Pol Pot.
Right. Right. Yes. Right.
Right? And so when you're succeeding the Khmer Rouge, you're not looking so bad. He has a very very low bar to measure up to, and he measured up to that. Like there hasn't been like too many wars, too many. It's been like pretty stable. They have an economic growth, but now he did this, which is like maybe they should put him out to pasture. By the way, Cambodia is officially still a monarchy. There's a ceremonial monarch. The Sihanouk are
So
still
is
in
Thailand.
power.
Right?
Yeah, in Thailand as well. Thailand's less ceremonial though, in terms of like, you know,
Yes.
you
I,
in
I,
Thailand they have like a they have those rules where you can't like insult the prime
right.
minister, and the military have stepped in multiple times because they think the democracy is in Thailand's like it's kind of like a corrupt nation, like the Chinawat, Thaksin Shinawat, like or like they're oligarchs, there's the oligarchs versus the military versus the king. There's all sorts of like weird dramatic tensions there. It just shows you how egos and like personal crap got involved into like basically a geopolitical conflagration between Thailand is not it's not a trivial economy. There's a lot of exports and stuff from Thailand, and it would have been a pain in the butt. Also, it's a big tourist destination. Obviously, we all know that. And so
Yeah.
again,
For
it
sure.
would have been like pretty interfering. And it's not that far away from Singapore, the Straits of Malacca, Southeast Asia, and ASEAN. I think there's like 600 million people or something like that. I mean, 40% of it's in Indonesia, but still, that's a pretty important economic, geopolitical region. And if there had been a war, that would have been like a major pain in the ass. You know, candidly, there's the whole Gaza thing happening, which we're not going to talk about today, but like it's more of a humanitarian thing. It's not really a big, like, it's not a big deal that Gaza was taken offline,
Yeah,
you know?
in a
Yeah,
geopolitical
Israel's been doing this thing for almost 2 years, and, like, the reality is, like, aside there was, like, the Yemeni, like, what is it? Like, the Houthis were, like, interfering in some trade, but
right.
the reality is, like, the war is more important for, like, bigger political, sociological, and, like, humanitarian reasons, whereas, like, if Thailand and Cambodia got into it, it would be like, okay, like, this is like Thailand better win quickly because, like, this is
Okay,
gonna start to interfere with stuff related to economics and tourism,
right.
and, I don't know. I don't think Cambodia has a big navy, so it shouldn't be an issue, but there's a lot of trade that goes through that region,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. My main knowledge of Thailand, other than, uh, you gotta be wary about going there if you're a single dude on vacation, but, I just remember, there used to be these, Twitter argument. I forget what it was about, but these Thai, uh, guys were beefing with some other people, and the other people, to try and get at him, started to, like, insult the king, he's like "Your king's a sex pervert," or whatever, and the Thai, Twitter people were like, "Well, actually, it would be illegal for me to say that, but thank you." You know? It's like, we don't actually like the king, but, we can't say anything bad about him because we will go to jail, but,
Yes,
uh,
they would.
yeah,
Yes, they would. I mean, you know, wars are bad, and, like, they're not a big deal. Like, these little wars are not a big deal. Look, honestly, even the Ukraine thing is kind of a pain in the ass, but, like, we still have, like, wheat and the world. So we have the biggest land war since World War II in terms of, like, the raw numbers of people in the eastern edge of Europe right now, and we don't
right,
even talk about it anymore. It's just like
right,
we've just kinda, like, priced everything in, and, um, I do kinda we said this before, like, we both miss the 1990s, we miss the peace, you
right,
know? Like, big
yeah,
land wars weren't happening, we get, like,
yeah,
all the seed oils from Ukraine and stuff like that, but, Odessa's free port, and it's got, like, a border at the west, so I guess it's been fine, but, libertarians, economists, like, they are correct about war, like, it's definitely, like, non-zero sum, at least in the proximate sense. Now, wars
right,
can be, like Peter Turchin, cultural evolution guy, would say, wars can be beneficial in terms of, like, competition between states is a strong signal of which system works. And America did not defeat the Soviet Union in war, but the Cold War arguably was kind of like, by the end, the Soviet Union just could not compete with
yeah.
our, technological innovation. Like, they were like copying like crazy, but you can don't do only so much. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if the Soviet Union was still around, them trying to create Soviet smartphones?
Well, there was a show, there's a Polish TV show that came out a few years ago called 1983, uh, where despite the fact that it was called 1983, it was actually set I think it was set in 2003, something like that, and it was in an alternate history where, like, the communism had not fallen, but, uh, Poland did seem to have, like, like, Poland had more independence. Um, they were still communist. They had more independence from, Russia or the Soviets than, in reality or whatever. But, there is a scene in that where they're, like, introducing the, like, Polish smartphone or whatnot, you know? It's not, uh it's kind of a funny show, and, it's not meant as a comedy, but, it's a fun show, and that, like, basically Poland's trying to develop nuclear weapons, um, and I think Al Gore is president at the time, and he's invading Iraq, you know? So there's like a lot of little stuff like that, but yeah,
Huh.
it's not. I don't know that it's the most economically accurate. I'll put it that way.
Well, okay, so, this is like an alternate history, but, I think, I've you've read a lot about, like, Soviet U I just, like, I think, like, 6 months ago or something, you were reading a lot about Russia, whatever, communism.
It's
From
periodic.
everything that I've read about communism and the fall, of communism, um, Gorbachev, like, okay, there were structural problems with, like, the media leaking, as well as the fact that, like, after the collapse of, like, the oil sector in the early '80s, the Soviet Union just, like, didn't have money, you know? Okay, so all sorts of things were happening. Those are structural issues where it's like, okay, they're gonna collapse, but, multiple people have said that Gorbachev in particular, uh, he was a bit of a softie in terms of, like, it
Yeah,
there's an alternate history where the Soviet Union kind of, um, limps on in some sort of form, like, if, like, he wanted to, like, reimpose some Stalinist discipline.
I mean, I agree with that. I would even go a step further. I think that, um, without meaning to, because Gorbachev, his desire at the time was not to end communism, right? So he thought, okay, we need to like reform communism in order to put it on a more secure basis. And things just, you know, got out of hand, you would say. And um, he, you know, was not willing to like, crack down to stop it or whatever. And so things spiraled out of control. So, I mean, I think even if you had just had someone who was not Stalinistic, but just wasn't reform minded, I think very likely the Soviet Union could have limped on. I mean, certainly things were not great there economically in the '80s, but they were not nearly as bad as they had been during the very early '20s or at other points in Soviet history. Um, Now, I do think that there was a difference in that people had like just generally had lost faith in the system more than in some earlier periods, perhaps. But I mean, you just look at Cuba or North Korea. Um,
Yep.
Certainly, that's possible. It's also, I also think, you know, so that's a possible model is they could have just limped on. You also could, I think, have had successful, reforms, as would happen in China, where they did do economic reform. I mean, basically, and I think it's a good thing that the Soviet Union collapsed and communism ended. I'll put that out there. But basically, there's a in 1989, Gorbachev goes to China and visits Deng, and it basically tells him, "Hey, you're doing things wrong. You're doing things the wrong way around. You're like um, doing all these economic reforms, but you're not doing political reforms, and you it, you're going to lose if you do it that way. You got to do some political reforms." And um, I think Doug's daughter said that he thought that Gorbachev was like an idiot or more like a bozo or something. And the proof is in the pudding. The economic uh, reforms worked in China. They were able to maintain control. And in Russia, the economic reforms didn't really work. The political reforms, they lost control, right? From my perspective, that's a good thing. I'm glad that they're not communists anymore, although democracy did not work out for them. Um, but but yeah, like presumably they could have just gone the China route and said, okay, we're gonna do uh, you know, we'll do the economic stuff more competently maybe, and we'll just repress any dissent, and eventually things will work out okay.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this like, digression is just like in terms of like the egos and the decisions. of certain individuals, like, history is sensitive to that.
Yes.
We because
Yeah.
like a Marxist, or not even a lot of non-Marxists, like, we think of like, you know, we live in the United States, and like, there was a period at the end of history, which, like, I don't want to caricature Fukuyama because he's caricatured, but a neoliberal idea of like market liberalism as an inevitable force due to consumerism. We
Right.
had that idea. Obviously, does not work that way. So, China just kind of falsified it.
Yeah.
Arguably, Russia did too, because they had the 1990s, liberal consumer period. But the unfortunate issue here is, which a lot of Americans, I think, are now more conscious of. When we were younger, we were not as conscious of it. The Russians really hated the oligarchs who were running the country, and
Right.
that's one of the reasons Putin became pretty popular, because he clamped down on them, step by step. Like, it wasn't like overnight, but gradually he did, and now Russia is, well, I mean, Putin is the only real oligarch, but I think they prefer to have one strong man rather than like, a collective oligarchy. So, I think, I think we're in a good position when it comes to Cambodia and Thailand. And if Biden was still in power, I think they probably still would be skirmishing, because I think Biden would be
Probably.
taking a nap right now. I mean,
Right.
Biden might be like a foreign policy genius, but the problem is he's always asleep. I mean, he has cancer
Right.
now. We're not going to talk about this, but like, do people ever think about? I mean, Biden has cancer right now.
Yeah.
If he had actually gotten reelected, um, we would really, really be run by other people. This country would not be run by Joe Biden.
Right.
Okay, so there's a ceasefire there. We're talking about foreign policy, and
Yeah.
um, so you want to talk about conspiracy theories. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Have we reached? And like, we both live in Austin, Texas. You are good friends with Alex Jones. Who is
Yeah.
like, no, but we live in Austin, Texas, where there's Alex Jones and there's Joe Rogan.
Right.
And I like Joe Rogan. I've met Joe Rogan. He's a nice guy. I have like, I've stood next to Alex Jones. I don't say I've met him. Like, I've shook his hand. I think I shook his hand
Right.
once, but I mean, I don't know Alex Jones. I talked to Joe Rogan for like hours. He's a nice guy. I was in the studio. Colin Wright was like recording, and I can see why he's popular. On the other hand, like, he is susceptible to conspiracy theories, and those are percolated throughout society.
Right.
Um, and but the issue is, I'm gonna let you talk, because, like, I'm gonna let you talk. But one of the things with conspiracy theories is they're very popular among the masses, and they've always been popular among the masses. It's just that, um, the masses now have a voice. There's the tribune of the plebes are out there in terms of these like midwit podcasters.
Mhm. Well, yeah. So my perspective, I think you're right. I mean,
And like, I think the context here, just to bring it back to previous podcasts, Epstein, and
well,
all that.
Epstein. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my thinking, conspiracy theories have always been with us. It's arguable that the United States would not have been founded if it were not for popular belief in conspiracy theories. But I do think that over the last 10 years ago, uh, belief and support, and even mainstreamish, mainstream adjacent support for a lot of different conspiracy theories has become a lot more prevalent. And that, I'm sure, to some degree will continue. But I am wondering, in the same way that people used to talk about, have we reached peak wokeness? Is wokeness, back 3 4 years ago, is wokeness just going to continue to get worse and worse, or has it crested? And looking back, it does seem like probably peak wokeness was sometime, you know 2021, 2022, somewhere around there, right? And I wonder if we might see something with the popularity and, mainstream acceptability of a lot of conspiracy theories, where it's just, I mean, it's not that it's going to go away, but it's peaked. And there's a couple reasons I have for thinking that. One is, of course, this Epstein stuff, which there are still a lot of people who have questions about that. I don't think that's going away. But the difference is you have a lot more pushback than you did before, right? I mean, um, and I also see that I see similar stuff with other, kind of popular theories like some of the UFO stuff, I'm seeing more pushback on that. Um, uh, Candace Owens she has made a variety of wild claims, including saying she stakes her reputation on it that uh, Bridget Macron, uh, the president of France's wife, is actually a man.
I mean, she could just prove it.
Well, I mean, the Macrons have now sued Candace Owens for libel, um, and they have apparently presented, a fair amount of what you might call circumstantial evidence. I don't think they've done like a blood test or anything or a genetic test, but they showed like these are pictures of her growing up. These are the birth announcements of her children. These are the blah blah blah. Anyway, uh, I think what's happening partially is especially and I'm going to talk about the right, but I do want to come back to the left and liberals and conspiracy theories in a moment. But let's just focus on the right. Um, there was a period, I would say, where there probably have always been a fair number of people on the right who who have always thought, Epstein probably just killed himself, right? Bridget Macron is a woman, like we went to the moon, 9/11, that was bin Laden, or even other stuff like I know, for example, like you take the vaccines, for example, the COVID vaccines. There's a lot of right coded vaccine skepticism and people making all sorts of claims about that. And I know I would privately talk with people who are on the right who would say, I mean, this is just incredibly stupid. Like, this is dumb. The vaccines are fine. But for the most part, they wouldn't like publicly push back, right? Because there's no point. Like, what's the point, And so I think that the same thing was probably true for Epstein and some of this other stuff. And so what's changed is now you have people who either thought it was BS all along or who are now convinced, for whatever reason, they've changed their mind. And so you're starting to get more pushback, right? And some of that I think has to do with the fact that Trump is now president. It's, I mean, it's harder to have all these conspiracy theories about the FBI when your guy is running the FBI, right? And in a way that was not true during Trump's first term. I think even when Trump was president previously, I think you could the obvious thing to say was, well, look, he's the president, but the deep state or whatever is against him, So like, yes, he's president, but the FBI is spying on him, right? He's, all these people, even people in his administration, are working against him, and that's a harder sell this time because the FBI director is not James Comey. The FBI director is Kash Patel, right? Um, a lot of the more anti-Trump Republicans are just gone, and the people who are in there are more loyalists or MAGA or whatever. So I I suspect that because of that, um, you're going to see more pushback from the right on some of this stuff, and that will kind of reduce the popularity of it somewhat. I do want to say, obviously, when you talk about conspiracy theories, people have focused on the right, and that's understandable, but it's there are a lot of conspiracy theories on the left and among the liberal establishment, and sometimes people don't recognize it because it's coming from CNN as opposed to uh, some random podcast or whatever. But there were tons of people, for example, who said that Trump was some kind of Russian agent, right? And that there were like like there was a P tape, there was all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I mean, what is that if not a conspiracy theory, right? And there's other examples as well. Um, like I don't think someone described the idea of systemic racism as a giant conspiracy theory. I guess it's not. It's kind of the opposite of conspiracy theory because it's about like huge impersonal forces as opposed to a group of people in a room conspiring or whatever. But you do have a lot of. I'll just say it's not a exclusively right wing issue, and I do think that maybe with the vibe shift, some of that will fade as well.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So yeah, I think the key issue here is people like Dan Bongino, Don, yeah, whatever that guy. He is in position of power. Cash Patel, like a lot of the peddlers are like of the conspiracies, frankly, are in positions of power. So now, they have to like disown it, and Trump is quashing it. So a lot of his, MAGA like base who are, I mean, a lot of the MAGA base are like pretty normal people with pretty normy views on a lot of things, and they'll go along with Trump, and they would have gone along. They're not QAnon people. QAnon people is a very specific subset that are very invested, and the hardcore conspiracy people are very unique. Um, I read an article years ago about um, the John Kerry 2004 truthers. There was like a
Right.
whole. I mean, some of them started from like 2000, but really it got like amped up with Diebold, I think, in
Yes.
Ohio and all this stuff in 2004. Some of those people actually became pro-Trump. I mean, they continued obsessing
Right.
with this thing that nobody in the country cared about and actually kind of forgot about. They were like in 2012, they would be like, Kerry actually won in 2004, and then 2016, Kerry actually won in 2004. And then what happened in 2020 was Trump started saying that, the election was stolen. And they're like,
Right. Yes.
well, I mean, 2004 was stolen. So there were some of those people who were like,
Right.
yeah, it was stolen from
It's
Trump,
stolen. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And so, I mean, those people are obviously extreme, though. Most
Yeah.
people are not like super invested in even no matter what they say to the pollsters. It's just not a big thing for them.
That's probably true. I will say, and this, maybe cuts a little bit against my peak conspiracy theory, but I was just seeing today, there are Harris really won truther people.
Yeah,
Both, I was reading something today about, basically Elon and the tech bros hacked the voting machines type stuff, which I think has been, almost now it's almost like a rite of passage. Whoever loses says that the election was hacked by the other side or whatever. But there's also this thing called the 4 a.m. Club. Are you familiar with the 4 a.m. Club, Razib? Have you heard about this?
I think I heard about it. It was like some woman.
Yeah. So these are.
eh,
It seems like it's all women. I mean, it doesn't seem like it has to be, but every example that I've seen is a woman. So these are people who believe, so the reason why it's 4 a.m. club is because they woke up at like 4 a.m. on the Wednesday morning after the election, and they just had s- they were filled with this sense that Harris won and that Trump didn't win. And you might think, okay, well, this is maybe this is an understandable emotional reaction. You really wanted her to win. You thought she was going to win. You know, they say that the five stages of grief, the first is denial, right? Um, but no, according to this theory, what this sense really tells us is that these are people from an alternate timeline in which Harris did win, and they've been sucked into the current timeline in which Trump won in order to somehow merge the timelines so that Harris can be president in both of them. It's something like that. I don't know. It's it doesn't make a lot of sense. It actually does kind of sound like it's left Q in a certain way. I mean, it's a sort of like if you dug into the QAnon stuff, it started out conspiratorial, and then after a little while, it got more and more like psychedelic and quantum realm type stuff going on. So that stuff is out there, left and right, but I do think that maybe it'll go away a little bit. Um, we should probably move to the third topic because I'm going to have to uh, cut
All
out.
right,
Right.
we're gonna talk about we're gonna talk about America's number one Nazi, Sidney Sweeney.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to conversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse we can find the ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on